For me, preacher's kid, man, it changed my perspective of people like you. And things like this building. You see, I grew up in it. So after a church service, people could be walking out going, yes, that was awesome, the Spirit led. Oh. And for me, it was like, yeah. Because I would watch people. And this morning it struck me that you know, you're singing the worship songs and you're kind of into it, you know, kind of. Some of you tried to clap. Some of you are whiter than I am, and you couldn't. But some of you tried to clap. Some of you didn't want to clap. Wasn't very reverent. Some of you stood stoically. I will not enjoy myself today. But didn't college football just start? Somebody knows. Pre-game, preseason football, isn't it on? Is NASCAR going around a circle? Is baseball knocking it out of the park? You all, many of you, will check out of here today and then get excited about something. And for me, growing up as a preacher's kid, that's what I saw. I saw people who had an awesome time through the week. Excited, party, yeah, it's awesome. Come into church. Leave the door. I'm excited. Like, why are you doing it? What? I don't like that. That stinks. I made it my life goal that I would get no more excited about anything than I do about Jesus. Nothing. And if I raise my excitement level of something else, then I raise my Jesus up a little bit. Okay? He's just going to have to be number one in my life or it's not going to work. And he can't be number one if you're more excited about something than you are him. If anything is more exciting to you than Christ himself, you've missed the boat and you've got a really religious lifestyle with God. And you've missed the mark. So that's what it was for me. But here's what's really weird, because I get cynical. I did get cynical doing that. Because there was a game we all play. I played it. Guarantee some of y'all are playing it. It's called Jesus Says. Have y'all played the game Jesus Says before? Well, when you're here, I'll show you. When you're playing the game Jesus Says, you look really good. You act really well. But you get really judgmental about the people who aren't playing the game. You know, Jesus says this, do it. Jesus says that, do it. Jesus says go here. Jesus didn't say look over there, but you looked over there, you're out. Can I tell you, when I dropped out of the game, life was much more fun. When I dropped out of playing Jesus Says, I enjoyed life much more. But then I would go to a church conference or I'd go to a youth camp. And I'd think, man, I really need to get back in the game. And Jesus says, read my Bible more. Jesus says, I need to pray more. Jesus says, I need to be at church more often. Jesus says, I need to accept my calling. Jesus says, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'll get back in the game. And I got back in the game and I got fired up. And then I started looking around. And I go, why aren't y'all back in the game? If I'm going to be miserable, you need to be miserable. And that's the game of Jesus Says. I don't think we ought to play the game. There is no way to win the game, Jesus says. And if you're not going to win the game, don't play the game. It's kind of like the lottery. If you're not going to win, don't play. I know the lottery says you can't win if you don't play. I understand. But we all know that's a lie. See, I like being out. It's much easier. And so do you. You like when you're out of the game. You just don't realize it. You don't like playing the game. You just end up playing the game. It's a game that you and I have been taught from day one. Jesus says you shouldn't do that. Why shouldn't I do it? Jesus said so. Oh. Jesus didn't tell you to do that. No? Then don't do it. Jesus says. Jesus didn't say. It's a horrible game. It's a disaster. Maybe you grew up in that atmosphere. I don't know. Do, don't. And then you just didn't feel like you lived up. You were horrible at it. You felt like you needed to play, but you were horrible at it. And you would sometimes come into a building like this, and you would sit through a sermon, and your immediate feeling was, oh, God, I feel so bad about myself. I didn't do what Jesus says this week. Or, I could have done more of what Jesus says this week, but I just, life got in the way. And I should have read my Bible every single day, but I didn't. I'm sorry, You hate me. I don't really deserve to be in here. I had people come into church service, and they'll tell you, I don't deserve to be here. I was horrible this week. And I really want to go, you mean you got kicked out of the game? Sorry. There will be another round soon. You can get back in on the next round. But that's how we are. That's how we walk around in life. You're not disciplined. You're not consistent enough to play the game, especially when you're hanging out with people who are really good at playing the game. At least they think they are. And you're constantly rubbing elbows with people who are telling you that they're doing what Jesus says, and if you're not doing what Jesus says, then you're obviously not like them, and if you're not like them, you really need to go on somewhere else. Or you need to get back in the game. Because God only honors you when you're in the game. And you may not be using all those words to describe your life, but if we can get real down and dirty, you'll probably realize that that's how you're living your life. It's a game. You suck at it, but you really can't drop out. I'm going to convince you maybe today, hopefully, that you will just drop out. Because what happens is you'll get that way, you'll get discouraged, you'll come in here like, I'm just going to go home. Maybe I'll read my Bible. Maybe I'll get back in it, and it'll start to feel good. And you know what? If I go to hell, at least I'll know some people. And that becomes, I talked to somebody just last week. I worship at home. I can't handle the church. And it's because the church is playing the game and they feel they've been tagged out of the game and they can't get back in the game until they start playing the game with the same rules that you all are playing, and then they're not going to do that. They're done with it. And in reality, those are the people I champion. Don't play the game. If you have to, get completely out of the game. And that's what I ask you today. If you could just erase everything you know. And I'm not saying you've been taught wrong. I'm just asking you to take a different perspective. And to do so, you're going to have to erase everything you know. Even if you erase everything you know about God, pretend it's all brand new today. Okay, and all you've got is Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The Gospels, what we call the Gospels, first 4 books of the New Testament. Let's pretend that's all we've got, and I want us to look at this life that you call Christianity and see what it looks like from the perspective of the dude who started it, and that's Jesus. Of the guy who actually brought it to earth and said, this is what it's going to look like. And then I want you to look at your life and go, do I look like that? Or am I playing the game Jesus says? Because here's what you will find out. If you drop everything you know, forget everything you know, and start over, and you start reading, we're going to read Matthew, a little bit of Matthew this morning, and you'll find out this. It is so relational. Here at our church, we say it's not about the rules, it's about the relationship. Okay? And then you and I, we say that, and we go, yeah, we got the relationship. And we call it going to church. And our life looks like Jesus on Wednesdays and Sundays only. And we serve God out of duty. And we've got a relationship, and God's talking to us, and I'm doing what Jesus says. And if I'm doing what Jesus says, then I say I've got a relationship. That's not the picture that's painted in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It's not the picture. When Jesus called people to Christianity, he did not say, do what I do. Do what I say. He didn't at all. I'm going to show you what he said. But it wasn't that. I don't know where we got so backwards. Jesus said things like, I came so that you can see the Father. Like father-child. He gave three examples of how his relationship is supposed to look. Father-child. He said God's the ultimate father. He's the perfect Father. That's the relation. That's the kind of relationship we're looking at here. And Jesus said, I represent him. So it's like you and I are going to be like a father and a child. How many of you know that when you raise kids to just do what you say, it never works? How many of you have said, do as I say, not as I do? You ever said that? Doesn't work. It will not work. They would rather do and will always do what you do, not what you say. You cannot teach people to play the game Jesus says. Or, yeah, you can teach them that. Doesn't really work, but you can teach them. Then he gave another example. He said, it's like a vine and a branch. We looked at this a few weeks ago. It's that integrated that the vine gives life to the branch. The branch doesn't say, hey, I think I'll bear some fruit, because Jesus told me I should bear some fruit. It doesn't say that. The vine says, or the branch says, hey, vine, give me some fruit. We know that it all flows through the vine. And then he gave another one. We looked at this about 4 weeks ago. He said it's like shepherd and sheep. And they really understood that one because there was a whole lot of sheep running around. And Jesus would say, of all the sheep, mine know my voice. They know that when I'm around, they know me. They're that intimate. They have that kind of relationship. They can be standing around and they go, oh, that's the shepherd. I need to go that way. That's the shepherd. Bah, good. We had that. Somebody didn't save it, but we have it. So this whole Jesus says thing, not good. And anything less or anything more than a relationship with Christ will mean that you're missing out on what God really wants for you. You really are. I can prove it, and I'm going to try. Because we've been invited, quotes, invited into a relationship. That's what we've been invited into. And here's the word that I want you to remember, that I want you to write down, that I want you to apply to your life. And we may use 2 or 3 weeks. I don't know. To see if we can get it. Here's the word. Follow. Your day, every single day, should consist of, how do I follow? Jesus extended many invitations to follow to every kind of person imaginable. He went through the gamut. Everybody in that day represents somebody in our day. And he cut them all. And he said, follow. I'd like for you to follow me. That's what he said. That's all he told them to. And here we get the first account of this. Matthew chapter 9, verse 9. It'll be on the screen. You can turn to it there. We'll give you a little second. But this is the very first account of Jesus walking up and saying, follow me. Now what's interesting is that when he said this, when this story starts to unfold, people were already following him. They were just wandering around behind Jesus because he was doing stuff. He was leading people around. But he walks up, and as Jesus went from there, and there is over there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. Okay? Follow me, he told him. And Matthew did what? He got up and followed him. Now real quick, we kind of talked about this a couple of weeks ago, but I want you to just you got to have a good picture, because sometimes we read over that and we're like, oh, Jesus just like picking disciples here and there. There they are. He's going to be one of the 12. Yeah, pick them. No, didn't do that. Remember, this is a tax collector. He was worse than a sinner, okay? Tax collectors had their own category of bad, okay? Really bad people. There were sinners, and then there were tax collectors. You see, Rome would auction off the right in all of its provinces to collect taxes for them. And typically, only the wealthy people would be the collectors of tax, because you were auctioning, and there was going to be a lot of money made, because if you became a person who had the right to collect taxes for Rome, you just had to give Rome their portion. But then you had a license to collect as much tax as you wanted. As long as you paid Rome their portion, they didn't care how much you collected. So these rich guys in these Roman provinces would go and they would hire tax collectors in small towns like Judea. So here we have Matthew working for a guy who collects taxes, and he's at a booth. See, the big guys don't have booths. The tax collectors have booths. And this is why nobody liked them. You were now working for the Roman government. You were a traitor. You were a Jew working for Rome, benefiting off of Roman money who was being made off of the Jewish people. It's bad. Nobody, instantly, if you took the job, and you couldn't refuse the job, it was way too much money. They would pay these tax collectors, the provincial guys would pay the tax collectors enormous amounts of money just to collect the taxes. You couldn't refuse, but you instantly became hated. Instantly. Because there was taxes for everything. They had a crossroads tax. If there was a road that crossed another road, they would put a tax collector, a booth, at that road, so that if you crossed it, you had to pay a tax. You went over a bridge, pay a tax. Hello, Sanibel. Food, tax. Property, tax. You went to the market, tax. Booths everywhere. Jesus walks up to one of these guys that everybody hated and said, "Follow me." He could have said anything to Matthew. Anything. He could have said, "What is your mother going to think of you? Your mother would roll over in her grave if she knew what you were doing." I mean, couldn't he? Couldn't he have just attacked what Matthew was like? Couldn't he have just attacked the person Matthew was? Couldn't he have just said, "Dude, you need to get a different job"? Couldn't he? He didn't. He walked up, knew exactly who Matthew was, knew exactly what Matthew did, and he hadn't chosen his 12 yet. So that's why there's a whole lot of people just kind of following him around. They considered him to be a rabbi. And he walks up to Matthew and he says, "Hey, you in the tax collector's booth, I want you to follow me." Think of the crowd. What? A tax collector? I mean, I can imagine Peter was probably there, maybe. They were walking together, and he walking over to the tax collector's booth. Peter is probably the guy that's going, "You're going to get this guy. Let's see what Jesus has to say about tax collectors." Follow. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Back up. Back up. What do you mean, follow? If he follows you, then that means he's with you, and I'm with you, but I'm not with him. So you want him to follow you, that's fine, but don't expect me to sit and eat with him. Not going to happen, Jesus. This is a little weird. And Jesus would probably look back and say, "You ain't seen nothing yet. Nothing at all." He says, "Follow me." I'm sure somebody was standing there going, "Surely he did. Did he just say follow me?" No. What, y'all heard him wrong. Ask somebody up front. What did he say? He said, "Follow me." He said, "Follow me." And then everybody kind of goes, "Where are we going?" If a formal invitation, remember, Rabbi, this was a formal invitation to Matthew that everybody else that was following him didn't have. This is the first one. Jesus says, "Follow me. I invite you to be in my inner circle. I want you to come sit at my feet. I want you to know every single thing I know." What? A tax collector? Don't you think he ought to go to temple first? Don't. God, come on. And I doubt they called him God. Lots of things he could have said, but he said, "Nope, follow me." And what did Matthew do? He got up and he followed him. Matthew follows directions really well. I question, are you as good as Matthew? I could question, are you as bad as Matthew? But the answer is yes. But are you as good as Matthew? That you would just simply get up and follow. Jesus says, "Follow me." Matthew says, "Okay, close up the books. Not going to collect taxes right now. I'm going to go follow this guy." Are you as good as that? Would you do it? See, he didn't say all the things that I expected him to say. If you're playing the game that Jesus says, he didn't say any of the things you expect him to say. Matthew, if you will just, then you can follow me. Matthew, if you'll just quit, you can follow me. He didn't. He simply said, Follow me. Follow me. Matthew didn't even ask, where are we going? I'll follow you. And listen, I know this sounds simple. It sounded way simple to them. But do you understand how complicated the game of Jesus Says is? Versus the relationship that God offers is so simple. Jesus even said, my burden's light. It ain't heavy, okay? There's no rules to the game that I want you to go. There's no rules to the relationship. There's only rules to the game you're wanting to play. And it will weigh you down. But what I'm offering is simple. Follow me. And I'm sure they started walking, and then Matthew says, where are we going? Where are we going? What does Jesus tell him? Well, you got to kind of read into verse 10, and it says that they're going to Matthew's house. And he did this. Remember Zacchaeus? Same kind of guy. He went to his house. His house? That's when Peter probably really lost it. Okay, hold up. Listen, that's fine. You want to talk to this tax collector dude. I assume you'll get a hold of him and change his life. That would be great. But listen, we're not going to his house. You're not going to catch me at his house, Jesus. Nobody goes to his house. The only people who's going to be at his house are tax collectors. Because tax collectors weren't allowed to go to temple. Tax collectors weren't allowed to go to the rec center and play soccer with everybody else. I said soccer because I saw Mike. Tax collectors weren't allowed to do anything except hang out with other tax collectors and maybe a few sinners. I mean, they thought of tax collectors like you and I think of a guy who would hang out behind 7-Eleven near the elementary school and sell drugs to the little kids. I mean, that's about as, or maybe something worse that we don't even need to talk about in here, but that's the kind of people tax collectors were to that generation. And Jesus says, we're going home with you. Wow. So Jesus is having dinner at Matthew's house. And then what's that next word? Many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. His disciples being the people that were kind of, that went on in. Some didn't. Some didn't go in. Some went in. And here we have Jesus sitting around a table with a bunch of people that absolutely nobody wants to be around. Nobody. They're the butt of society. They're the heel to the loaf of bread that is society. Nobody wants them. Nobody wants to be around. It's offensive. It's even offensive to some of the sinners to hang out with them. That's pretty bad. But here they are, and Jesus is sitting at the head of, maybe not even the head of the table. He's just sitting with them. Pretty cool scene, at least in my book. Disciples, can you imagine? They're sitting at the table eating with Jesus, and they're looking out the window wondering if somebody's going to walk by and see them. Oh, can we get this done quick? Oh, God. And they probably weren't talking to Jesus. Can we gotta hurry up. I'm afraid somebody's going to see me. Got a reputation. I got a way to look. I got a way to be. And if they see me in here, it's over. And then the people outside, get this, the religious people, the Bible tells us that the religious people, the Pharisees, they would shadow Jesus. Everywhere he went, they went. Not because they wanted to know what he was saying for their purpose. They just wanted to see what he was teaching. They didn't agree with any of it. So they're standing out the windows, and they're looking in, and they're griping about who Jesus is hanging out with. Hello? You got anybody in your life that'll gripe about people you hang out with? Now, get this. Jesus was not hanging out with them just to be hanging out with them. Jesus had invited him to follow him. Jesus had said, I want you to follow me, but I know you're not going to follow me unless I get intimate with you a little bit, unless I introduce myself a little deeper to you. So that's why he went to his house. He didn't just go to his house to hang out with sinners. Okay? He went to get them to follow him. We'll see that in just a second. But that should sound a little familiar. Have you ever seen the video of the abortion clinic picketers? You're going to hell, you're going to hell. Because Jesus could have done that. He could have stood outside Matthew's booth or Matthew's house and held up a sign and said, tax collectors are burning in hell. Tax collectors will burn in hell. You need to change your life. You are bad, bad people. He didn't do that. The only way you're going to touch somebody is go find out where they live, find out where they are, introduce them to Christ through you. Figure it out. Jesus had it figured out. Jesus was extraordinarily comfortable with people who were nothing like him. He had nothing in common with a tax collector. You understand that? But he was extremely comfortable with them. And then people were extremely comfortable with Jesus even though they were nothing like him. Why is it that you and I separate ourselves? Nothing like you. I'm not comfortable around people who I'm nothing like. Well, that's not a Jesus model. The model we see here is that he was extremely comfortable with everybody, especially those who he was nothing like, because the religious leaders he had everything in common with. And he didn't want to be around those guys. And those guys definitely didn't want to be around him. But he had more in common with them. Jesus was God. Can you imagine Jesus' self-esteem? I mean, have you ever met somebody who is so comfortable with themselves that it actually made you feel confident? That you were around them and they were confident, and because they were so confident, you got kind of confident? I imagine that's what Jesus was. That was him. He was operating in the shadow of the Father. I mean, he was doing exactly what God the Father had called him to do without a care in the world of what other people thought he should be doing. And that's your invitation. To follow him. And to follow him into an area of life that people won't understand, will not agree with, and yet God himself calls you to do it. To follow him. He's leading from a place much higher than here. Much, much higher. Jesus liked people that were nothing like Jesus. And people nothing like Jesus. And if you don't think that's happening today, you need to get out more. You need to quit playing the game and get underneath his umbrella. Because here's the deal. If you're here, maybe you don't buy into this. Maybe you're not a Christian. Maybe it's like, that's a little weird for me. Well, if you feel anything from us except complete and total acceptance and love, that's our fault. It's not the Christ we represent's fault. And it's not your fault. It's my fault. It's our fault. It's those who say we are following him. It's those who say we have Jesus in our heart. Somebody is not accepted by you, it's your fault. We're the ones, and that could be a good indicator of what round of the game you're in. Just read the Gospels, I dare you. If you don't buy into it, maybe if you're not into this yet, maybe you're still playing the game, read the Gospels, all of them, all four, and just read them. And see just how important it is for Jesus to say that he likes you. Because, newsflash, he does like you. Just a little, she said. He likes you no matter who you are. Listen, Jesus will not be put off by your sin. You don't have to play the game to get Jesus to accept you, okay? He will not be put off by it. He understands your sin. He will want to hang out with you even though he knows your thoughts. You ever play the game so much that you try to control your thoughts? Don't think like that, don't think like that, don't think. Jesus says don't think like that, don't think like that. Jesus wants to hang out with you even though he knows your thoughts. That's what kind of relationship we're talking about. It's pretty powerful. Jesus looked at Matthew, knowing what he did last summer, knowing what he was going to do next week, knowing what he was going to do next year, and he still said, follow me. Then look what happened. When the Pharisees, here they come, when the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples. Now, That's how I know there's disciples they can ask and disciples they can't because they're inside. Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? Why does your teacher, see him drawing a line? Why does your teacher, your rabbi, why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners? Now listen, Jesus is inside. He's sitting at the table. He's the one eating with tax collectors and sinners. And he's got a couple of disciples around him. And he hears this commotion out there. Also, he knows what they're thinking before they even said it. But anyway, he's sitting there at the table. And you've got to imagine that he's sitting there eating. Maybe they're having some bacon. Probably not. I don't know. Maybe they're having biscuits. I like biscuits. They're eating biscuits. And Jesus is just smiling. It's going to be good. And so they ask the question. And then here's what Jesus says. On hearing this, Jesus said, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. That's kind of been your mantra before, right? It's not the healthy. Remember where he's sitting when he says this. Can you imagine? Everybody's sitting around eating. They're having a great time. I can't believe Jesus is here. They're having this guy. Nobody's having. Jesus, you're at my house. You just said I was sick. Wait a minute. Thought you liked me. And Jesus would have looked back at Matthew and said, dude, you sick. You are sick. You see all your friends around here? They sick. And the friends probably would have looked around and went, yeah, we're sick. High five, we're sick. That's offensive, but true. See, here's the point. You know you're sick. You know there's something wrong. Right? Anybody got the Facebook post about the Chinese symbols? Something wrong. You know it. Lost people know it. You play in the game, know it. You know it. It doesn't feel right. There's something wrong. I'm sick. And Jesus is saying, but notice where I am. I'm with you sick people. I'm not out there with you guys. Why do I need to be with you guys? I need to be with these guys. In essence, he was telling the Pharisees, chill out. We're on the same team. Just doing it a little different. He didn't say, Pharisees, you're sick, they're sick, we're all sick. Hey, sick. He said, these guys are sick. They need to meet me. They need to follow me. So that's what he told them. Follow me. Guys, you're not even consistent with your own rules, much less God's. Dads, you don't follow the same rules you want your kids to follow. Moms, you don't live up to the same standard that you want your girls to follow. Employees, you don't live up to the same standard that you would like others to do with you. Bosses, you don't do what you'd have your employees do. You're sick. And playing a game of Jesus says won't make you well. Only following him will. So maybe you're one of those who need to admit, I need a little help. I need a doctor. That could be a good song. I need a doctor. Because only men and women, only single people, only kids, only whatever, who are willing to look in the mirror and say, I need help, are the prime candidates to be followers of Jesus. Only those people who will look and say, I need help. I need something to follow are prime candidates. Nobody who stands in the mirror and says, I got this, needs to be a Jesus follower. Not anybody stands in the mirror and say, I had this. I got this one time ago. I understand this. No, you don't. You don't understand this. Pharisees understood what they thought meant to follow God and to listen to Him. You don't understand what it is, because every single day, the scenery changes, the relationship changes, everything changes on a daily basis when you're talking about a spiritual level of Christ, because you and I don't understand what tomorrow is, but He does, and He's an expert at tomorrow. And if you're going to follow somebody, you really ought to follow somebody who knows where they're going. Not a rule, not a game. But then he gets a little more offensive. He says to the Pharisees, why don't y'all go learn something? Go learn what this means. This is Hosea. They should have known it. Selena, they should have known it. But he's telling them, go learn it. You read it, now go learn it. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. I'm not here to call the righteous. I'm not here for you. I'm here to call the sinners. Go learn that. Go learn what it means that I desire mercy, not sacrifice. You see, the religious people offered sacrifice. You offer a sacrifice to God. Some of you might be here today because you canceled work. I sacrificed so I could go to church. Some of you are here because you sacrificed something else that was fun so that you could come to church, and you're playing a really good game, and you're looking at Jesus going, but I didn't go. I just looked at Randy. Fishing. Right, God? I didn't go fishing. I could have went fishing. You know I had the chance. But I didn't go. I could have went and played golf, God. He called. I mean, it was an amazing opportunity, one of the best golf courses in the state, and I get to play for free. It would have been a good stewardship of your money, but I didn't do it. I came to church. You're offering sacrifice. Sacrifice that doesn't even count. God says, I want mercy. I want to see mercy. I want to see you relate to people in a merciful way. I want to see you to love people. In other words, I'm not content to hang out with only those who believe all the right things and do the right things, but I want to hang out with those who understand they have no clue what it means. It's funny, our youth went to Epic, which is at another church here in town. And my son made a very profound statement when he came in. He didn't know it was profound because he's only 17. But he made a statement that was pretty profound. And he said this. Dude, I wouldn't go there. There was an atheist there. And to me, I was like, that's where I want to go. You telling me that an atheist felt comfortable hanging out with a bunch of people who you say are Christians? So either you're good at playing the game or you were being Jesus. What was it? Jesus would have much rather been at dinner with a bunch of tax collectors and sinners than at church. Let that get into your pipe and smoke it this afternoon. Jesus would have much rather hang out with them than you, if you're the one just playing the game. Go learn. I don't want that religious garbage. I want mercy. I want to teach mercy. I want to see mercy. I want to be with people who know there's more to just believing. I want to be with people who are doing this thing. I want people to follow me who don't just call themselves Christians. We said for 3 weeks we don't want to just be a Christian family. We want to be a Christ-centered home. That's where Jesus wants to hang out. Man, you and I better dare not come together and say we know how to behave, we know how to do, we know how to be the right way, and stop there. If we do, we'll find ourselves standing outside of a room where Jesus is inside, calling people to Him. We'll find ourselves looking through the window of what God is doing all around you. And you won't be able to be a part of it because you think it's different. God is calling you to follow. I don't want to pastor a church. I don't want to attend a church with a bunch of people who believe the right way and behave the right way and nothing more. And forget that you have been called to come and to call. Because if Jesus was called to come and to call, then you are called to come and to call. And if you don't know him, you can't call him. Because all those guys out there, they're hoping you've got something to offer because they know they're sick. They know they're sick. That's all. Just don't be religious. Maybe you grew up that way. I don't know. You see, when they grew up, they looked at people and they said, change and you can join us. Jesus came, flipped it all upside down and said, join me. But don't be surprised if sometime in the future you look in the mirror and you don't recognize who you're looking at. Because that's what happens when you follow me. I just get all over you and then you start wondering, what the heck happened? I used to like those other, I used to like doing that stuff, but I don't anymore. So, don't stop doing what you're doing just to follow Jesus. Just follow Jesus and see what happens with your life. He says, I'm like a father. I'm like a vine. I'm like a good shepherd. And I just want you to follow me. Regardless of where you are, the invitation's for you. I'm going to give you 4 things. We're done. I wore a broken watch this morning. It's just for looks. I'm playing Jesus Says. Because Jesus says preachers need to wear a watch. Here's the first thing you need to remember. Being a sinner doesn't disqualify you. It doesn't disqualify you. It actually is a prerequisite to follow God. Every single person that Jesus invited to follow was a sinner. They were pigs. They were ugly. And that's who Jesus wanted to follow him. The only people who resisted to following Jesus were the ones who thought they were perfect. The ones who thought they had it all together. You still see that today. If you look at somebody and you decide they've got it all together, they got a good house, they got a good family, you look at them and you go, well, I don't really need Jesus. I think I'll go hang out with the homeless people. You're missing it. Everybody's a sinner. Everybody. And they're the only people who can follow Jesus. It doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter what you have or don't have, or live or don't live, or drive or don't drive. That has nothing to do with it. Quit living your life trying to identify a people group who needs Jesus. There's been one identified. They're called sinners. If they don't know Jesus, they need to follow him. You understand that if they don't know Jesus, they don't need to know him so that they can follow him? There's a big difference. I hate trying to get people to say a prayer. I hate it. Oh, your life sucks? Come here, pray with me. Now just repeat after me. Jesus, I believe you died on the cross, and I believe you saved me from my sins, and now you're the Lord of my life. And then I slap them on the back and say, have a nice life. How stupid am I? How stupid. Jesus says, follow me in your ugly, pig-eating house life. Follow me. And I'll change you. I'll change you. I'll change your outlook. I'll change your attitude. I'll change what you do. I'll change everything about you. You won't even know what's happening. Just follow me. Just follow me. Listen, Matthew was the lowest on the totem pole. He picked Matthew, I think, because there was nobody worse than that group of people. And then he went to his house. Before Matthew ever prayed a prayer, ever shook a preacher's hand, ever knelt beside a tree, ever did any of that stuff, he just started following Jesus. Do you understand that's different than the way you and I are doing it? You and I are just trying to get people to come in here and look like us. Listen, would you just accept Jesus and come to church? If I could get a few more people, we could put a few more people on staff. Why is that? Well, the more you come, the more money comes. then it gets ugly. I mean, just ask people. I ask this all the time. Somebody will say, they need to come to our church. And I'll ask them, why? Well, if they come, we could afford more. We could do, but they do it this way. We could do more for God's kingdom if there were more of us. Why don't you just say it what you mean? The more people that come, the bigger the 10% percentage is, the bigger the plate is, and the more stuff we can do with that money. Just call it. That's not what Jesus asked you to do. Jesus asked you to just go follow him. Go follow him. And do you understand that when you follow him, you make disciples automatically? If you will follow Jesus, you make disciples. And a disciple is someone who follows Jesus. When you follow Jesus around, people look at you and go, what the heck is wrong with you? And you say, well, just follow me. And I'll introduce you to the dude I'm following. Follow. Just follow. Well, what does that look like, following Jesus? I don't know. Let's take a step and see. Let's just do it one step at a time. I'm not promising you anything. Except the fact that where he's going to lead you, no problem. It'll be right. Second thing, being an unbeliever doesn't disqualify you. Just, so some of you are out there, really, you maybe even accepted Christ, and you're like, yeah, but I don't necessarily believe Jonah swallowed up by a whale. And if somebody's playing the game and you say that to them, you go, well, you better believe it. The Bible says it, by God. And if you don't believe it, you're probably not a Christian. You need to get on your knees right now, and you need to repent that you didn't believe it. Jonah got swallowed by a whale. Because there is no way you can call yourself a Christian and not believe that. What, did Jesus do that? No. Here's how I know. Jesus walked for 3 years with a bunch of people, and every time something happened, they didn't believe it. Jesus had to look at them and go, you and your unbelieving heart. 2 years into this thing, Jesus does something, and the Bible says, and they believed. What they've been doing for 2 years. Just following. Just following. You see, sometimes you just have to follow. It's okay if you don't believe it all, because they were following and yet not believing. So you just keep on following. That's okay. One of the disciples even had a nickname because he didn't believe. Y'all remember who that was? Thomas. His nickname was Doubting Thomas. All the way to the end. Jesus dies, okay? Jesus rises from again, walks through a wall, and Thomas goes, could have been a trick. I mean, if it was you would be playing the game, you'd have went, oh, come, you know what? You just need to get out. I mean, if you're playing the game, you'd have expected Jesus to say, there's nothing else I can do for you, dude. You need to get out of the game. You go do something else. He didn't. Jesus just said, touch it. And it doesn't tell us if Thomas did it or not, or changed or not. But Jesus didn't fuss at him for it. He just said, keep following. You notice Thomas followed into the room. He went where Jesus was going. He just didn't believe it. Many didn't even believe until he was raised from the dead. What kind of faith does that take? You see Jesus pop out of a grave and then you go, I believe. It doesn't matter what level of belief you are, what level of faith you are. Listen, a church who's firing on all the cylinders is just full of people who are some a little belief, some a lot of belief, some a no belief. But they're all focused and pointing at the same thing. The guy who's leading them, the one they're following. Third thing, the invitation to follow is purely an invitation to relationship, not an invitation to the 10 Commandments. That's not the invitation that God set out for you. Listen, come, obey the rules. He did not ever say that, nothing. It's not even an invitation to one of my favorite words, obedience. He didn't invite you to come obey. If you're married, who wants to be married to a person? Okay, let's pretend you're married and you know all the marriage rules and you follow them. And your wife or your husband, they know all the marriage rules and they follow them. Great marriage, right? Technically, in the game of Jesus says, I do all the right things, I say all the right things, I know all the right rules, and I act the way I'm supposed to act. Good? No. Absolutely not. I'd much rather do all the marriage stuff because I'm in love with the one I'm in the relationship with. I'd much rather do all the right things because I love the person of the object that I'm going with. Wouldn't you? I'd rather fall in love with Jesus and then follow the rules because of the love. I'd rather just love him so much that I'm not gonna. I can't help but not. If you start loving Jesus, you will start doing some different things. That's a guarantee. But not because you got up in the morning and said, I can't do this, and I don't do that, and I shouldn't do that, but because hopefully you've been in love. And if you've been in love, then you understand you'll do different things. You'll do some different things. Last thing, following forces me, this is big, to focus on me and not on you. If I am simply worried about where Christ is leading me today, I don't have the time to look at your life and wonder if you're following him. I don't have the time to wonder if you're playing a good game or not. I don't have the time to analyze every spot in your life and say, well, that's not what Jesus would do. You need your bracelet. You evidently didn't ask what would Jesus do before you did that, did you? If I'm focused on following him, I don't have the time for all that. If I'm just getting up in the morning going, okay, God, thank you for this day. I'd like to know where you're going to lead me. And then I never talk to him again, I got plenty of time to talk to you. But if I'm continually following him, finding out where I'm supposed to go every single step, I don't have time to mess with you. By design. That's what he'd have us do. So the question, and we can go. You need to ask, am I following? Or are you trying to figure out if you're reading enough, praying enough, doing enough, attending enough? And that's your litmus test. Or are you just doing what God said? Follow me. Follow me. We'll figure this thing out together. I'll let you know. You're on a need-to-know basis. If you're following Jesus, you're definitely on a need-to-know basis. And right now, I don't need to know about tomorrow. I don't need to know about you. I need to know about what God would have me do. And that's what he'll tell me if I'm following him. Stand and let me pray for you. God, I just pray that now we'll question everything we've heard today. We'll question it to the point that we'll analyze if we've been playing a game or if we're truly following. We'll decide if maybe we need to get out of the game. Maybe, God, there's some people in here that need to switch teams. And they need to truly follow you. Whether they call themselves a Christian or not. But they need to follow you. Your lead. I just pray that you'll grant us some courage today. Because it will look a whole lot worse to the world than our life does now. I just pray that we can step out of this mold and that we can follow you. Thank you for new life. Thank you for a life that you've promised in yourself. We accept that. I accept that. In your name we pray. Amen. A couple things before you go, and we'll leave out of here. We got to tell the greatest 10-year-old in the world happy birthday. Where'd she go? She sleep through the service? What do you expect? So Gracie's birthday is today. She's 10. So y'all, that's right. And then Angela and Norris Allen, Dr. Allen, they have planned today open house at their office on Central Avenue. Raise your hand. Everybody here, it's for us, okay? It's for us to go and see, to become a part of, to have great Jamaican food. Yeah, okay. So there's food there. It's from 1 to 4. If you don't know where it's at, if you'll just see Angela say, you know, I'd like to come over and see it. She'll give you a little form, tells you where the address is. Many of you have already received them, but everybody's invited once you do it. And then tonight, listen, Health Park is going on. Last time we went, there were 4 adults that went and did Health Park. There's over 120 residents at Health Park. You know how long it takes 4 people to visit 120 people? A long time. We need help to do that, all right? It's a low-impact ministry. It's just a way for you to follow God into a place and share Him. Be here tonight. If you want to ride the bus, we leave here at 5:45. If not, we'll meet you at Health Park off of Bass Road at 6 o'clock. It's a great time to be had by all. Then watch the bulletin. Be a part of everything we are and everything we're doing, because while you're in town, you're part of our family. We're going to stay all the way to 4 o'clock. We're going to be at 6. It's 2 hours. Somebody will be driving the bus. My wife is giving me a hand. Good? How is it that God brought you into the house today? Amen? Are you happy that God brought you into His house today? Randy Hutto. Would you pray for us as we leave?